Dating to at least as far back as 1300 BC from ancient China, the Chang oracle bones are often described as the earliest recorded evidence for Chinese beliefs in the afterlife. These bones, taken from the shoulder blades of oxen and tortoise shells, were used by Shang rulers for divination and were believed to establish a link of communication with ancestor spirits and deities, having been utilized in determining whether a dream, a military action, or a day of hunting was auspicious or a negative portent. The inscriptions on these bones also describe the ascent of the souls of kings and their entrance into a heavenly realm. Although the level of detail is limited, the basic possibility of an ascendant soul, a heavenly afterlife, and the existence of spirits in the form of ancestors, and a wide range of deities remain relatively consistent throughout Chinese history. As with any civilization with thousands of years of development, a myriad of distinct cultures and kingdoms, and a host of varying opinions related to theological and philosophical concerns, the religious systems of China and their countless monks and intellectuals have pursued a rich and dazzling variety of viewpoints about the fundamental mysteries of life. In Chinese texts, we find a variety of bejeweled paradises filled with spiritual beings and enlightened masters. We find worldviews practically overflowing with spirits, superstitions, the ghosts of ancestors, and deities presiding over specific earthly and heavenly functions. In China, we have 1,000 threads of theological silk, interweaving and disentangling again, crossing the intersections of folk religion and refined afterlife conceptions of privileged literati in Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, and for a short time, the universal love philosophy of Moism. In this essay, far from attempting to untie or cut the Gordian knot of religious worldviews in Chinese history, we are strictly interested in documenting a specific strand of an experiential nature, being the mystical, near-death, and spontaneous out-of-body experiences across a range of Chinese texts and traditions. This experiential focus will serve as an introduction into Chinese religious syncretism, offering experiential accounts that helped shape various religious attitudes of Taoism, Confucianism, and Chinese Buddhism. The records of NDEs, or near-death experiences, in ancient China are abundant and contain some of the earliest known, unambiguous accounts of near-death experiences in the world. In studying this broad phenomena, we encounter rulers of principalities leaving their bodies during a sickness and roaming heaven with a celestial emperor, returning to see prophecies given during the experience fulfilled. We find from a record on a tomb an account of a man who was returned to his body for dying prematurely, another account of a woman dying and being revived from within her coffin 6 days later, after encountering her deceased relative who informed her it was not yet her time to die. We encounter more legendary experiences based on much earlier figures such as Princess Shushan, a daughter of King Chuang around 700 BC, who is said to have been taken on a tour of the underworld after being condemned to death by her father for practicing sorcery. After losing consciousness, the princess encounters a deceased king and helps sinners who are being punished in rather graphic ways by singing sutras that save them from their torment. Perhaps one of the most startling accounts is found in the Shiji, or a historical chronicle of ancient China called the Records of the Grand Historian. This work began in the 2nd century BC and contains numerous near-death experiences from centuries earlier. In the case of Wing-Tsit, this man leaves his body in 498 BC, travels to the residence of the Emperor of Heaven, where he encounters a child standing at the Emperor's side. Wing-Tsit found himself in all-ruling heaven with many other spirits and divine music that moved his heart. He is given prophecies and predictions related to political affairs and future turmoil for his state, which all came true in the ensuing years. But many years after this experience, Wing-Tsit encounters a man on the street in an entirely different province, who who somehow looks familiar and won't get out of his way. This man blocking his way was none other than the child in the near-death experience who was standing beside the Emperor of Heaven. In fact, this man was, as the child, simultaneously outside of his own body and lucid during his own near-death experience, and he recalled the surreal details of Qianxi's experience because he had been there himself, sharing this precise encounter in heaven with Qianxi. This report was recorded in an official government document, and the relevant parties were interviewed about the experience with the date, time, and the village noted. Quite a beautiful report of an out-of-body experience can be found in Wandering Far Away. This work, traditionally attributed to Ku Yuan, is a Chinese poem depicting an out-of-body experience of a man weighed down by suffering and, quote, yearning for far-off realms. In this work, we find numerous universal characteristics of OBEs with the simultaneous culture-specific elements. These universals can be shown to be prior tumult, light at the initiation of the ascent, the inner eye omnivision of the soul's point of view outside the body, a guiding spirit, and the entrance into joy and unity. The poem contains, quote, "Grieving at a dead end in a degenerate time, I wished to be weightless, to ascend and wander far away. But with no such power among my feeble gifts, what would I ride to float to the sky? I was sinking into a bog, overwhelmed by filth. In stifling sadness, who was there to turn to? Wide-eyed, sleepless nights I lay alone, till morning light fell on my cowering soul. I paced the floor, yearning for far-off realms. Then suddenly my soul flitted out and away, and did not return as my earth-bound body withered. And with the inner eye, my only guide, I set forth to find the source of primordial energy. Detached, clear, and calm, I felt joy, contentment born of a placid lack of intention. I had heard the stories of Red Pine's miraculous life and now wished to walk his path of purity. There is nothing higher than those powers of the perfected ones, nothing more beautiful than those who anciently attained transcendence, vanishing into unity with cosmic process, leaving but name and legend to age with the days." This poem contains more radical elements of mysticism and the human dilemma. The author recounts others who had achieved transcendence and oneness, those who vanished, quote, into unity with cosmic process and, quote, broke free of the human herd and went beyond. The author is undergoing immense emotional turmoil and longing, yearning for the heavenly domains. The experience arises spontaneously, but not without the explicit, initiating turmoil, an object fixed in his mind, and some level of surrender to the experience. In another poem of debatable authorship, called Summoning the Soul, we find ritual content related to the return ritual, where a shaman would summon a recently deceased soul back to its former body. Quote, "Come home, bright soul, you have left your body." In this Summoning the Soul poem, we also find mention of the Minister of Dreams, who was in charge of dream interpretation and finding the souls of the dead. For dreams in ancient China were understood to be forms of spirit travel. In Duzi's near-death experience in the 2nd century, Duzi dies from ingesting poison and is later revived by a Taoist master. After his revival, he said, "When I died, it was suddenly as if I had entered a dream." Compare this to the mention of death being compared to waking up from a dream by Master Zhuangzi, one of the founders of Taoism. Both the dream realm and post-death experiences can provide the potential for prophecy across Chinese texts, and spirits of the deceased could visit the living through their dreams. From the 6th century BC, there is an account where a dream is reported to have accurately predicted the coming deaths of 2 rulers over a year in advance. The cause of these deaths, as given in the dream, was Po Yu, a deceased and embittered man. It took a prime minister to make the proper political appointments, one being that of Po Yu's son, for the malicious spirit of Po Yu to stop his harassment. The above description of a bright soul or luminosity of the soul is not only consistent across cultures, but has more ancient precedent in Chinese literature. In the Shi Jing, or classic of poetry dating from the 11th to the 8th centuries BC, spirits of the deceased are described as very bright, very glorious. Other souls are similarly described as shining and glittering in heaven. In this same work, the Milky Way is like a flowing river in the afterlife, and in heaven there are beautiful songs. Souls of the dead are also evaluated according to their conduct in life. Some souls find their way to a happy kingdom, whereas others are given to the ruler of the realm of the dead, Yu Pei. In the Zhuangzi, souls can even become stars in the Milky Way, much as we find in some strands of Platonism, Native American accounts, and more. In the Xianger commentary on Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, a Taoist text from the Celestial Master tradition dating around the early 3rd century CE, the commentator, who is traditionally Zhong Lu, interprets and expands upon this sentence from Lao Tzu, quote, "Their bodies obliterated, they do not perish." The commentary explains a palace of grand darkness, where worthy individuals voyage who have accumulated Tao. These souls pass through the grand darkness so as to be obliterated without perishing, being reborn on the other side. Whereas, quote, "the profane are unable to accumulate good deeds, so when they die it is truly death. They are taken away in service of the earth offices." This same author reports that, quote, "sins will be tallied up among the celestial officers." One Chinese statesman, Chang, a contemporary of Confucius who lived during the 6th century BC and served as the chief minister of the state of Shang, explains how a man might become a spiritual being after being asked whether or not a deceased individual who lived as a drunkard and died a violent death could become a spiritual being. Chang replied in the affirmative, saying, quote, "In man's life, the first transformations are called the earthly aspect of the soul. After Po has been produced, that which is strong and positive is called the heavenly aspect of the soul, Han. If he had an abundance in the use of material things and subtle essentials, his Han and Po will become strong. From this are developed essence and understanding until there are spirit and intelligence. When an ordinary man or woman dies a violent death, the Han and Po are still able to keep hanging about men and do evil and malicious things." One of the world's leading scholars in ancient near-death experiences, Gregory Shushan, reported that there are some 127 untranslated near-death experiences in a single Chinese source, the extensive records of the Taiping era. He also recalled the work of the Dutch historian and sinologist J.J.M. de Groot, who reported the existence of numerous untranslated Chinese books dealing with near-death experiences. This same de Groot attempted to show in his research that the 3 primary religions of China, Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, were often acknowledged as one religion of the people. He called this universalism, and points to elements throughout Chinese thought that did not contradict one another across these religious worldviews. Yin and Yang, for example, represent the dual aspects of the soul as an extension of the macrocosmic reality. De Gruyter in one place quotes from a classical Confucian text, where Confucius answers a question about these dual aspects, saying, quote, "The qi, or breath, is the full manifestation of the shin, and the po is the full manifestation of the kui. The union of the kui with the shin is the highest of all doctrines. Living beings must all die, and the soul which must then return to earth is that which is called kui. But while the bones and the flesh molder in the ground, and imperceptibly become the earth of the fields, the qi, or breath, departs to move on high as a shining light." We can find this fundamental teaching throughout various ancient Chinese texts, and through the medieval period. Take this passage from the Neo-Confucianist Chu Si from the 12th century, quote, "When exhaustion takes place, the heavenly aspect of the soul and the vital force return to heaven, and the earthly aspect of the soul and the body return to the earth, and the man dies. When a man is about to die, the warm material force leaves him and rises. This is called the Hun rising. This same author is no less definitive about the Taiji, or the Great Ultimate, the cosmological original source of the yin and the yang, and the ultimate source of reality. Quote, "The Great Ultimate is merely the principle of heaven and earth and the myriad things. With respect to heaven and earth, there is the Great Ultimate in them. With respect to the myriad things, there is the Great Ultimate in each and every one of them. Before heaven and earth existed, there was assuredly this principle. There is no other event in the universe except yin and yang, succeeding each other in an unceasing cycle. This is called change. However, for these activity and tranquility, there must be the principles which make them possible. This is the Great Ultimate." In the Yuan Nanzi, a text dating from around 122 BC, made up of scholarly debates and a collection of essays on religion and philosophy, we encounter the belief that the soul is perpetually in a state of change and transformation, coming into being through non-being and necessarily being reconciled in the afterlife according to its deeds, where a number of options are available to the soul under certain conditions, ranging from becoming a ghost on the earth to penetrating non-physical heavens, and having one's sense of I being annihilated in mythical solar regions. But more, the soul can even become godlike, with winds and rains under its sway, riding mythical creatures into entirely new dimensions of unfathomable explanation. This is similar to poetic NDEs from the same century, where souls have gods as their psychopomps and can live within the stars into successively more divine realms, until they may return, as it were, to a new point of beginning. In so many places, the pattern remains consistent. 1. Souls exist beyond the body with an aspect that can remain earthbound, and an aspect that ascends to heaven. 2. The ascended soul encounters some degree of judgment and reconciliation in the afterlife. 3. The soul is ever-changing and transforming, capable of navigating inexplicable heavenly realms, including those that totally dissolve any sense of individuation. 4. The soul can encounter deceased relatives, ancestors, or deified historical figures unique to their culture and beliefs. 5. The soul has a luminous appearance, and 6. Can take on characteristics usually reserved for the gods. For the realm of the ancestors and those of the gods were often one and the same. We can either remain unobservant of the interconnecting patterns and reserve judgment in a perpetual paralysis or appeal to the sentiments of skeptics and specialists, or we can suppose that the rich threads of afterlife conceptions running through Chinese religions were mere literary developments and expositions of hopeful imagination. Or we can address these generalities according to their explicit experiential origins. That is to say, when a soul leaves the body and travels through different realms, encountering deities and precise characteristics amid dazzling detailed variety, we can determine that such variety and characteristics in these experiences were what actually influenced theological beliefs accordingly. In this manner, we are not shrugging off the experiential origins of these foundational beliefs, and we orient ourselves to basic concepts such as the survival of death by the terms of those who experienced survival. In the Buddhist Sutra on the Merits of the Fundamental Vows of the Master of Healing, which was first translated into Chinese in the early 4th century CE and influential to Chinese Buddhism, we find another narration of the experience of a dying person whose spirit consciousness is led before Yama for judgment. Quote, "Then, while his body lies in its original position, he is seized by the messengers of Yama who lead his spirit consciousness before that king of the law. The inborn spirits attached to all sentient beings, who record whether each being's conduct is good or bad, will then hand down these records in their entirety to Yama, king of the law. Then the king will interrogate this person, and he will sum up the person's deeds. According to the positive and negative factors, he shall judge them." Medieval Chinese records of anomalies from the 6 dynasties contain numerous near-death experiences that shed more light on primary features of the Chinese afterlife. One individual, Chow Tai, who died for 10 days before being revived, went on a journey to a city in the underworld and described his sins before a figure who directed him into a role of inspecting the waterworks of hellish realms. Chow Tai sees the suffering of sinful souls, encounters a magnificent Buddha, and eventually learns how to avoid such a fate before returning to life due to a bureaucratic error that had delivered him there. After being directed to spread the news, when he returns, his story and message have a great effect on locals and even an imperial officer and a marquis, who then decide to honor the Dharma. Another man, a native Taoist, Qing Tao He, had a similar experience of touring the hells in order to return and inform the living of what they can avoid by living a virtuous life. Pure Land Buddhism, as it became formally known, was founded by Master Shan Dao in the 7th century CE. This is a school of Chinese Buddhism that branched into many different sects and variations, and was first pioneered by its first patriarch, Yuan, around 386 CE. This Yuan, a student of Taoism and Confucianism, later converted to Buddhism and was the founder of the White Lotus Society, a devotional society of monks and lay worshippers of the Buddha Amitabha from various parts of China, India, and Central Asia. The Pure Land school, if one may generalize, focuses primarily on being reborn in a pure land, where the individual may better be able to learn directly from a Buddha in order to reach nirvana. Pure Land Buddhism is quite distinct to China, and demonstrates how a religious understanding can transform and adjust according to more Chinese-friendly sentiments. One particularly Chinese attitude was the preoccupation with the afterlife, or the realm into which one is immediately reborn. Where some Buddhist schools might have developed more unwavering dogmas of anatta and the idea of the annihilation of the self, the Pure Land school depicted an afterlife of paradise open to all believers. In fact, the Buddhist master who converted the founder of the White Lotus, Tao An, famously worshipped Maitreya, the Buddha to come, and prayed to be reborn in the Toshiba heaven. When he died in 385 CE, a priest appeared and pointed to the northwest, where a visible and beautiful heaven opened up out of the clouds and was shown to him during his dying moment. Yuan, now converted to a syncretic and innovated Buddhism, wrote a number of treatises, one being on why monks do not bow down before kings, and another on the indestructibility of the soul. His unique approach to the soul is reminiscent of a variety of Chinese beliefs, and not altogether identifiable as Buddhist. For as Yuan wrote, quote, "As for the soul, it responds perfectly and has no master. It is extremely mysterious and nameless. It moves in response to things, and it functions in individual destinies. Though it responds to physical things, it is not a thing. Therefore the thing may change, but it does not perish. It is attached to individual destinies, but it is not bound to them. So that it is not exhausted when the destiny is terminated. The soul has the power of moving subtly." The White Lotus Society strove not just to be reborn in white lotuses in the Pure Land, but sought visions and contact with bodhisattvas during meditations. Liu Qingqi, the disciple of Yuan, who composed the vow of the White Lotus Society, is said to have witnessed visions of the Pure Land in meditation, saw the Buddha in the air whenever he encountered a statue. This disciple was devoted to reciting the Pure Land Sutras and eager for rebirth. He both predicted the date of his death and died without a trace of suffering, in a seated position facing the west. When the death of another famous disciple, Xing Qi, was approaching, the monk had come down with a disease and requested a gathering of the other monks. During one of the watches, Xing Qi had a vivid dream of the Buddha Amitabha who took him through the universe. He awoke and told his fellow monks of the vision, which came as a relief. But more, his body no longer showed any sign of the disease. The next night, he stared out in anticipation and laid down, smiling to the other monks, while he said, "I must go." Xingqi exhaled his last and died in peace. The 7th century monk of the Pure Land tradition, Shan Dao, embarked on an empirical approach to induce repeatable visionary experiences through severe meditation techniques. These experiences were recorded in documents such as the Qingtalun, which contains 20 near-death experiences from monks, laymen, and laywomen. These reports contain visionary encounters with the Pure Land through multiple witnesses and show that some who have visions of hell can transform their experience through chanting the name of Amida and thereby achieve a peaceful transition. Up through and after the medieval period, we can find Chinese hell reports, where a death results in some manner of a course correction on the part of the individual who returns to their body. As Carl B. Becker put it in his study of these events in Anabiosis, the Journal for Near-Death Studies, quote, "These historic accounts should make clear that there were famous people whose deathbed scenes were witnessed by many friends, carefully recorded and widely reported, who experienced an apparition of the Buddha Amida at their deathbeds." Such facts of religious experience were not only sufficient to bolster and encourage the spread of Pure Land Buddhism throughout China during the following centuries, but they also demonstrate that the belief in Amida had its basis in personal Buddhist experience of the Chinese, and was not merely a doctrinal or artistic distortion of Christianity or Manichaeism. The lives of later patriarchs point to similar experiential bases. In conclusion, the primary features of near-death and out-of-body experiences in Chinese religious literature remain consistent, and were of significant interest to locals and imperial representatives. Some of these experiences are relayed through poetry, others through direct recollection, and others through layered mythological accounts. After using Magic Mind and writing over 10,000 words this week, I'm thrilled to have a product with cutting-edge ingredients and a no-nonsense, unambiguous effect. Magic Mind not only hooked us up with a 20% discount on the mental performance shots, but shook hands with the channel and gave all of you 40% off subscriptions. Grab your discounts linked below and hit your passion project with more focus and less stress. In the future, we will explore more of these schools of thought and experiences in greater detail, exploring their metaphysics, theological principles, and the intriguing syncretism that took place across China. If you have made it this far, I should thank you and would sincerely appreciate any support you might be able to provide to keep this channel alive. A huge thanks to my patrons and channel members. As always, please find the links below in the description, and consider becoming a channel member or making a one-time donation. Be well. Thank you.